You are not too much. You are just standing in a room where enough is defined by people who benefit when you ask for less. Quick thing before we go deeper. We are building toward 1,000 subscribers, and your subscription genuinely helps us reach more people with this kind of psychology. And if this hits a nerve, tap like too, because it tells the algorithm this is worth spreading. Now, if you have ever noticed this pattern, I want you to take it seriously. With some people, your standards feel calm, normal, even obvious. With other people, the exact same standards suddenly feel aggressive, unrealistic, too high, or somehow morally wrong. That switch is not random, it is not your imagination, and it is not simply low self-esteem. Here is what is actually happening. Your standards are not just preferences. In a social system, standards function like a sorting signal. They do not only determine what you will accept, they expose who is capable, who is willing, and who is threatened. And that is why the wrong people do not just fail your standards. They try to renegotiate the concept of standards itself. Think about this for a second. When someone says your standards are too high, what are they really claiming? They are not saying, I cannot meet that. They are saying, you are not allowed to require that from me. That is a power statement. Now let me show you the first mechanism behind why it feels so disorienting. Your brain is running two evaluations at once, the content of your standards and the social cost of enforcing them. Most people only think about the first one. Is this reasonable? But the second one is what makes you fold. What will I lose if I insist? And the wrong people specialize in making the cost feel immediate. They do it through emotional pricing. They attach a penalty to your boundary. You ask for consistency, they withdraw warmth. You ask for honesty, they accuse you of being suspicious. You ask for basic effort, they act injured, like you just called them worthless. Notice what is happening. They are not debating your standard, they are making you pay for having it. In behavioral psychology terms, this is negative reinforcement. Your standard triggers tension. When you lower the standard, the tension stops. Your nervous system learns very quickly that standards create discomfort and compliance creates peace. Not real peace, just the absence of punishment. But your brain counts that as relief. Now here is where it gets interesting. The standards start to feel too high inside your own mind because your mind is mixing up two variables, high standard and high conflict. Around stable people, those two variables are not linked. Around unstable people, they are fused together. So you do not conclude, this person cannot meet my standard. You conclude, my standard causes drama. And that is how the wrong environment rewrites your self-perception. Let me give you a clean example. You expect someone you date to communicate if they are going to disappear for 2 days. That is not high. That is basic coordination. But if the person is avoidant, defensive, or entitled, your request triggers a self-image threat. They do not experience it as a logistical ask. They experience it as criticism, so they respond with counterattack. Why are you so controlling? Or they respond with moral framing. I do not owe you updates. Or they respond with fake rationality. I am just busy. You should be more independent. The point is not logic. The point is to punish your standard by making it socially expensive. And if you grew up in a system where love was conditional, your body will interpret that punishment as danger. That is why you start bargaining with yourself. Maybe I am asking for too much. No, you are asking the wrong person. But that is only layer 1. Layer 2 is darker and it is more structural. In groups, standards trigger a phenomenon called relative deprivation, and it produces resentment. People do not get angry when you have a need. They get angry when your need exposes what they have been getting away with. If your standard is speak respectfully when you are upset, that standard does not just require emotional regulation, it implies a judgment. Disrespect is not normal. And anyone who relies on disrespect as a tool hears that as an accusation, even if you never accuse them. So they try to normalize dysfunction. They will say things like, everyone yells sometimes, or that is just how relationships are, or you are too sensitive. This is not conversation. It is social engineering. They are trying to reclassify your boundary as an anomaly so they can remain the baseline. This is why, around certain friend groups or families, you start feeling like your standards are extra. It is not because your standard is extreme. It is because the group has a shared agreement to keep the bar low so nobody has to change. Think of it like a workplace where everyone is slightly incompetent, but bonded by that incompetence. The moment one person starts being on time, documenting work, finishing tasks, the group does not celebrate. The group panics, because competence creates comparison, and comparison creates accountability. Now, if that is true, then the next question is brutal. Why do you internalize their panic as your problem? Because humans are not just truth-seeking. Humans are belonging-seeking. Your brain is constantly asking, what do I need to be like to stay included? And it will trade accuracy for attachment. This is where cognitive dissonance kicks in. If you are attached to someone who does not meet your standards, you have two choices. 1. Accept the truth, which might require leaving, grieving, or confronting. 2. Adjust your beliefs so you can stay. Your mind often chooses option 2 because it is cheaper in the short term, so it tells you, maybe the standard is the problem. That is dissonance reduction, not wisdom, not maturity, just psychological pain management. Stay with me, because the next part is the one most people never connect. There is a specific tell that you are dealing with the wrong people. Your standards feel like a personality flaw, not a preference. When you are around healthy people, standards are discussed in terms of fit. That works for me, that does not. Let us align. When you are around unhealthy people, standards are moralized. You become difficult, high maintenance, too intense, too picky, hard to please. Notice the move. They turn your standard into your identity. Because if they can make it about your character, they never have to talk about their behavior. And once your standard is framed as your identity flaw, you start trying to fix yourself. You go on a self-improvement crusade to become the kind of person who needs less, which is, ironically, exactly what the wrong people want. Now let us go even deeper. There is a game theory layer here. In any relationship, there is an implicit negotiation over the minimum viable effort. People rarely say it out loud, but they are testing. How little can I do and still keep access to you? Access to your attention, your labor, your emotional support, your body, your resources, your loyalty. Standards disrupt that negotiation. Standards are you raising the minimum viable effort, and the wrong people do not simply fail the new requirement. They experience it as you changing the deal after they invested in the old one. So they try to get you back to the old contract. This is why your standard feels like betrayal to them. You will see this in phrases like, you changed, you used to be chill, you were not like this before, why are you making it a big deal now? That is not nostalgia. That is contract enforcement. And if you have ever wondered why you feel guilty when you finally ask for what you want, this is why. You are feeling the social pressure of a renegotiation, not actual wrongdoing. Now, mid-video pivot, because I want to flip the entire frame. What if your standards do not feel too high around the wrong people? What if your standards feel too high because the wrong people have trained your nervous system to confuse love with self-abandonment? Think about that. And many people do not experience being loved as being supported. They experience being loved as being tolerated while they shrink. That is the template. So when you finally have standards, your body does not interpret it as self-respect. Your body interprets it as risk of abandonment. You feel anxiety, then you call it high standards. But the anxiety is not evidence that the standard is wrong. It is evidence that you are exiting a system that required you to be small. Now here is the third mechanism, and it is the most subtle. Your standards are a mirror that forces self-assessment in other people. Healthy people use mirrors. They reflect and adjust. Unhealthy people smash mirrors. If you say, "I need accountability," a healthy person thinks, "Okay, I missed that, I will repair." An unhealthy person hears, "I am the kind of person who harms others," and instead of tolerating that discomfort and changing, they go into ego defense. Ego defense can look like denial, blame shifting, minimization, whataboutism, intellectualizing, or the classic one, counter-demand. Suddenly they have a new standard for you, not because it matters, but because it equalizes the discomfort. This is why the conversation turns into a messy courtroom. You bring up one issue, they bring up 6 unrelated ones. You ask for repair, they critique your tone. You say this hurt, they say you are not perfect either. The goal is not resolution. The goal is to avoid the mirror. And if you have high empathy, you are especially vulnerable here because you will start doing their self-assessment for them. You will think, maybe I delivered it wrong, maybe I should be softer. Sometimes that is true. But notice the pattern. Your empathy becomes the tool that lets them avoid growth. Now I want to make this concrete because the practical question is, how do I tell the difference between standards that are actually unrealistic and standards that only feel unrealistic in a bad environment? Here is the framework I use. It has 3 tests, and if you run these tests, the confusion starts to evaporate. Test 1 is the cost test. When you state a standard, does the other person focus on feasibility or on punishing you? Feasibility sounds like, I can do that, I cannot do that. What would that look like? Punishment sounds like, you are too much, you are ungrateful, you will end up alone, nobody will put up with you. If the response is punishment, you are not dealing with a standards conversation. You are dealing with control. Test 2 is the repair test. After conflict, do they repair without you begging? Repair does not mean grand gestures. It means ownership, changed behavior, and follow through. Wrong people may apologize. They rarely adjust. They will give you words as a substitute for change because words are cheaper than restructuring their habits. If your standard consistently produces promises but not patterns, your standard is not too high. It is simply incompatible with their operating system. Test 3 is the expansion test. After you enforce a standard, does your life expand or contract? With the right people, enforcing standards creates more energy, more clarity, more self-respect. With the wrong people, it creates exhaustion, rumination, and constant self-doubt. This is a nervous system diagnostic. Your body is keeping score of whether the environment is safe for integrity. Now here is the payoff, the meta pattern behind all of it. Standards are not demands you make of other people. Standards are the price of admission to your life. Wrong people hear price of admission and try to bargain. They offer you short-term relief, guilt, charm, intimidation, confusion, whatever works. Right people hear price of admission and decide. They opt in or they opt out without trying to dismantle you in the process. And that difference matters because it tells you what your standards are actually doing. They are not filtering for perfection, they are filtering for respect, for emotional adulthood, for capacity, So the real question is not, are my standards too high? The real question is, who gets angry when I require basic health? Because that anger is data. It tells you that your standard is touching a dependency. They depended on your flexibility, your silence, your self-doubt. They depended on you being easier than you actually are. And if you have lived inside that dependency long enough, you will start calling your own wholeness too much. One more angle, because this is where people get stuck. Sometimes the wrong people are not evil. Sometimes they are simply optimized for a different kind of relationship. Lower intimacy, lower accountability, more ambiguity. And if that is what they can offer, fine. But then the honest move is distance, not self-erasure. Your standards do not need universal agreement. They need alignment. So here is what I want you to do. The next time someone says your standards are too high, do not argue. Do not defend. Do not produce a PowerPoint presentation proving you are reasonable. Just ask one question in your head. Is this person responding to the content of my standard or to the loss of access to me? Because if it is the second one, you have your answer, and you might not like that answer. It might cost you a relationship, a friend group, a family role, a familiar identity. But it gives you something better: reality. You can build a life where your standards feel like oxygen instead of conflict. So the closing thought I will leave you with is this. If your standards only feel too high around certain people, your standards are not the problem, your environment is. And the moment you stop negotiating your worth, you will notice how quickly the wrong people call it too much, and how quietly the right people call it normal. If this changed how you see your relationships, tell me in the comments where you first noticed your standards being treated like a flaw. And pay attention this week to one thing: who gets calmer when you raise the bar, and who gets threatened. That difference will teach you more than any advice ever could.